Hey everyone, Brian Zane here. Hope you've been having yourself a safe and happy holiday season. Me personally, I don't know what day it is anymore because this is the weird phantom zone between, Christmas and New Year's, and I personally have been dealing with a cold the last several days, and it's just been, time is irrelevant to me at this moment. I couldn't catch it on Saturday night when it took place this weekend, but I was able to catch up on it and give you my thoughts for this here World's End review. And of course, no matter what I say, I know many of you watching have already made your minds up about me. Be that as it may, the opening matchup is the Continental Classic semifinal match. You got Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher running it back from their big dramatic matchup they had back at Full Gear the previous month, which Fletcher actually won. And he's really been on fire throughout the entire Continental Classic. A lot of people favored him to do very well and make it to the end of the tournament. We will find out here. Early on in the match, within the first minute or two, Fletcher gets this big hand-shaped welt on his chest from an Ospreay chop, and they would be going at it with chops the rest of the matchup on and off, and I felt so bad for Fletcher after that because, man, action on the welt, that's no bueno. There's a great moment here where Fletcher's getting his heat, does this apron powerbomb onto Ospreay, and then he gets on the barricade, he tears up the sign of the front row that says Ospreay better, and the fan just immediately pulls up Ospreay still better sign. That was phenomenal. Ospreay is busted open in the opening match, no less. Fletcher does these Kawada kicks, which gives his kick pads a lot of color. Very deliberate choice by Fletcher to wear the white in this one, and for Ospreay for that matter, but it was just a much more stark look to see the blood and the red just immediately staining Fletcher's white kick pads as he's doing those Kawada kicks and everything. That was very vivid, and boy, it looked like Ospreay took some aspirin before this one because he was just dripping throughout the entire match. Will finally lays in a clothesline to give himself some space. The crowd is hyped for the comeback here. Will busts out all kinds of stuff, but Fletcher is still toughing it out. There's a callback to the last match I really enjoyed in this one where they're doing the chop-offs, and Ospreay again opens his chest up waiting for another shot, but then unlike what happened at the last matchup when Fletcher cut him with a cheap shot, this time Ospreay sees it coming, he blocks that kick. Will hits the poison Rana onto Fletcher, who immediately hits the hidden blade. We get a double down. They're trading headbutts, running headbutts. Kyle gets in the referee's face, he pushes back and he walks into a hidden blade. Fletcher using the referee as a distraction, almost has it won. Fletcher hitting a version of the last... Excuse me. Like I said, I've been dealing with a bit of a cold. Can't quite pull off that voice for this review. The last ride, but there's still a kick out. Ultimately, Ospreay just withstands everything, hits a big Styles clash in order to win the match and advance to the finals of the tournament. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. I thought this was a really strong opening match, told a great story from the jump. It had those callbacks to their previous encounter. It didn't have the leaping tombstone onto the steps, which was the thing that irked me about their last matchup here. And with the beating Ospreay received, getting busted open early here, it really sets up a lot of intrigue for going into the finals here. On one hand, I did think it was kind of a bummer that Fletcher didn't win this one, considering all the momentum that he had gained after beating Ospreay last month. But on the other hand, I also figured that, Will was going to get his win back here and setting up a third match between them down the line, no doubt. And I do think that the story with Ospreay, at least going into the final 4 individuals, I think Will advancing here did make the most sense. We move on to our next Continental Classic semifinal matchup as Kazuchika Okada takes on Ricochet. Okada, of course, is trying to keep his dreams of staying Continental Champion alive. They're doing a lot of work hyping him up as the greatest tournament wrestler of all time, and can he hold on to that crown in this semifinal matchup? Meanwhile, Ricochet has turned heel, and my interest has definitely peaked as a result of this. I like the fact they've kind of leaned in to the fact that he is such a polarizing character in the wrestling sphere for his offense and whatnot and what he's done in the ring. They've leaned into what kind of felt like a general apathy toward him when he first got announced for AEW, and of course the way he got punked out in that Hurt Syndicate when they rescinded the invitation and everything. I mean, there's no going back. You kind of have to get booed for a while after that sort of thing happens. So I'm definitely curious where heel Ricochet can go. Hopefully improve with promos and stop retweeting Andrew Tate. There's this baldy chant early on, and then Okada does what many people have dubbed the spot of the decade, where Okada runs back and forth off the ropes a lot and then just like slaps Ricochet in the back of the head, which gets this huge pop. I thought that would have been funny if that was just kind of like the rest of the match, how the story went, where Okada tries different ways just to end up like slapping Ricochet in the head. Rico comes back with a dive to the outside and takes over. He talks a lot of trash. Okada slowly starts to rev back up. I do love when Rico does his little shrieks on the way to a big bump.
Target of Ricochet, but Okada.
There's a nice little sequence of counters that leads to an Okada drop kick. Rico reversing a tombstone attempt with a crazy neck drop of his own. Rico goes for the spirit gun, but Okada slips away, hits the Rainmaker Lariat to win and advance to the finals. Then a fan throws some toilet paper into the ring, kind of like what we saw at the Manhattan Center last week for Ricochet, and then that kind of gives away what's going to happen next because Swerve Strickland shows up. He shows up to kind of talk trash to Ricochet and kind of mock him for the fact that he didn't make good on his word to make it through the Continental Classic, and he says, "You're talking a lot of mess, and I gotta clean up your mess." And what's a better way to clean up that mess than with Prince Nana dancing his way down the aisle with a carton full of toilet paper rolls, and he's passing them out to the folks in the front row and everything, and he gets the fans in the front row to all throw the toilet paper at once. Happy New Year, and what a great moment. The way two of them land perfectly around Rico's neck, like he's wearing this little tie, it's hilarious to me. Though I was also wondering, why couldn't he have just like moved out of the way? Because he knows there's going to be a count, and then like at the 3, he could have just like maybe like, I don't know, left the ring to avoid people throwing stuff at him, just to be more heelish about it. But it was still a funny visual, obviously. I give the match 3 stars out of 5. It felt like a bit of a come down from the previous matchup. Obviously, you know, this match doesn't have the history and the backstory to it that the Ospreay Fletcher match did, and these are two very different personalities wrestling-wise. So you're going to get a bit of a slower paced matchup as opposed to Ospreay Fletcher, which was much more fast-paced and a lot more hard-hitting, high-flying, that sort of thing. So yeah, this one was like well executed, but it just didn't do it for me the same way the previous match did. And the stuff with Swerve at the end was entertaining. I'm looking forward to seeing what Swerve and Ricochet can do and how well Ricochet can continue to kind of lean into this heel role and what kind of a heel Ricochet will be. Backstage, Ospreay's getting patched up in the promo zone, and Renee Paquette asks how he's feeling. He says that in the 10 times he's wrestled Okada, he's lost 8 of them, so now he really needs the fans to carry him through this next round. And after he beats Okada, he's going to Disney World, which gets a nice pop in Orlando. Nice babyface promo there. Then we move on to the Tijuana Street Fight for the AEW Women's Championship as Mariah May defends against Thunder Rosa in her return to pay-per-view. And they really went all out with a theme on this one. They have like little like fake walls and bicycles and like wooden pallets and crates. You got Thunder coming out with a piñata in hand. Ooh, I bet it ain't candy in there. Mariah gets in Papa Thunder's face at ringside. That allows Rosa to get the early jump. They're on stage fighting. Mariah gets this mouthful of tequila that was on stage and just like spits it on Thunder, but not in that cool like Triple H way, the mist, where it's like pff, like that. She just kind of like this whole gob of liquid just like shoots out of her mouth and just like splats Thunder Rosa in the chest. But then Thunder tackles her through one of those walls at the entrance. Back in the ring, Thunder breaking open the piñata, and sure enough, it's full of thumbtacks. We get a mayday though onto the tacks. Somehow Thunder Rosa kicks out. Mariah goes back to Thunder's dad, yoinks his hat and his cane, and does a little cane walk. That was pretty funny. She wraps some barbed wire around her leg, but misses her target. But now Thunder uses the cane, and since it's her dad's cane, she gets an extra like family relations damage buff. Thunder is choking Mariah with the chain, but then Mariah uses pocket dirt and hits a leaping pile driver through the table on the outside to win and retain. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars out of 5. I think the match was like okay, but the finish especially got extra points out of me, just how sick it was. The way the table like exploded. I forgot the table had even been set up, so I thought that was pretty smart of them to kind of conceal it all the way up until the end when they get to the pile driver, and just the way like their bodies like fell and crashed. It was crazy. I hope everyone's all right from that one. I do like the themed street fights that they do and the way they kind of utilize the props and they work with their environment and whatnot. It kind of reminds me of that like that crazy like that Yakuza video game crossover match they did where they had these gimmicks like we got to use every one of them. So they definitely explored the space, and I'll give them credit for that. It's great to see Thunder Rosa back in action regularly, especially after the long hiatus she took from her injury. It's good to see her back on pay-per-view. Hope she gets another chance at the championship soon. Well, here's a match that I thought could have gone either way. It's a match with the Dynamite Diamond Ring as former rivals turned brochachos, turned rivals again. MJF and Adam Cole faced off. And we saw Matt Taven and Mike Bennett standing near the Dynamite Diamond Ring throughout the matchup, kind of cheering their boy on. MJF early on driving Cole's face into the steel steps, which busts him open. The crowd then starts chanting, "He's our scumbag." And MJF, like true heel, he rejects it and he tells the fans to shut the fuck up. And he drops the F-bomb a lot in this matchup. He is cussing up a storm in this thing. We also get "it bites a forehead." I love when that comes out. Cole intercepting MJF off the second rope with a kick. Cole appears to have re-injured his leg and MJF goes on the attack. Cole can't even run across the ring without falling. MJF wants to do some more damage on the outside, but Cole pulls him into the ring post and now Max is bleeding. Cole bites back, he hits the boom, but MJF still kicks out. MJF still cussing as the punches fly. He gets the figure four locked in at one point. He goes on the outside, he makes this big noise on the steps and starts to sell and act, very Eddie Guerrero, lie, cheat, steal, where he kind of frames Taven and Bennett for attacking him. The referee ejects them, but as this distraction is going on, MJF grabs the ring, very sneaky. Cole steals the ring, but MJF takes him to Dick Kick City. He hits the Heat Seeker, MJF wins and retains his big shiny ring. MJF, after the match, he's got a chair and he wants to Pillmanize Cole's leg like what he did to Roderick Strong's arm the previous month, but then Roderick Strong actually comes to make the save. He chases Max off. Then Kyle O'Reilly shows up and throws Max into the ring. Strong and Kyle lay out MJF. Cole and O'Reilly are back together now, and Cole gives MJF a wallop with a diamond ring. Cole and friends are happy despite him losing the match, but friendship wins in the end, kinda. I think of the one-on-one matches these two have had over the last couple of years, this was not their best. I think that it didn't need any blood either. The blood that they had not only failed to add anything to that matchup, it also diminished a little bit of Ospreay's story, considering what he's going through with the Continental Classic. So I thought that was a little unnecessary for them to bleed in this one. Because, considering this angle, I guess if anything, it's to try and add a little more drama and a little more heat to it. If anyone was going to take the ring from MJF after all this time, I figured it might as well have been Adam Cole. I figured it might be a nice little, consolation prize for him after everything. And, I don't think MJF needs it. I've never, at this point, this many years down the line, I just don't know what the point of the ring is for him anymore, unless he does give it, unless he loses it to somebody. But, the payoff for that, I wonder if the returns on that have already kind of passed, the maximum returns, that is. Where do Cole and friends go from here? That's going to be interesting to see. O'Reilly, I don't understand, when that turning point happened from, Full Gear, when he's yelling at Adam Cole saying, "This is all your fault that Roderick got hurt," to their bygones be bygones. They've patched things up. By the way, I'm not part of the conglomeration anymore. When did that happen? I must have missed that little sequence. But, I think he's a better fit for the group than Wardlow was anyway. And so we'll have to see what happens to Wardlow in the future, I guess. Does MJF, is he right by winning this feud here? Is this the end of the feud? I don't know, but it's got to be right, because how much more can they drag this thing on? Well, at this point in the show, I took a little break, had some ibuprofen, and then I watched the next matchup for the International Championship as Konosuke Takeshita defended against a returning Powerhouse Hobbs, who's really got it out for the Don Callis family after he was kind of left abandoned by them after his injury earlier in the year. It's his return to pay-per-view, big meat chant for Powerhouse. Hobbs shows off the power early on, but KT with an innovative piece of offense on the apron. Hobbs takes it on the knee. It's a much slower paced match than anything else so far on the show. It's just two big, powerful dudes. Obviously, Takeshita is more agile, and the more the moves feel, everything just feels more deliberate, harder hitting. There are some moves that feel more like a struggle for them to kind of set up and everything than usual. But I think it all makes sense for, the story and for how, again, the size and the skill sets of these individuals. Takeshita continuing to attack Hobbs' previously injured knee. Hobbs at one point blocks a clothesline and checks Konosuke. The champ fights to get Hobbs up, brings him down with his driver, but Powerhouse kicks out. These guys just hitting each other so hard here. Hobbs lays out the champ with the lariat, lariat, still not enough. There's a chop block and a blue thunder bomb, but Hobbs somehow kicks out at one, and Don Callis stands up from commentary. He's in such shock. Takeshita somehow survives. Scary moment in the corner. It looked as though they slipped a little off the top, but they do recover. Hobbs still has a ton of fight left in him, a big spine buster and a super power slam, but the knee is still an issue. Takeshita is able to pull off Raging Fire to win and retain. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. They definitely won me over in the second half of this matchup. At the beginning, it felt a little slow, a little clunky, but they got their act together, and by the end, they had the crowd hanging on every move they were doing. From like silence at the beginning of the matchup to full bore, just like cheering for everything, every move they made, and Hobbs showing some great babyface fire in this matchup as well, and sets up Takeshita nice for his match at Wrestle Dynasty. I hope Hobbs can keep his momentum going after his return. I'd like to see kind of a gathering or a group of like former Don Callis family members, because by this point there's actually kind of a growing number of them to eventually fight the Don Callis family. Backstage, Renee Paquette is with the Continental Champion Okada. He says of Will Ospreay that you're like my little brother. You're on another level, but you're not on my level, bitch. Then up next for the TBS Championship, Mercedes Mone defends against Kris Statlander. And you know, the match they had at Full Gear, that was pretty rad, so we'll see how they can possibly top that with this one. There's some nice quick work early in the matchup, a little bit in the ring, a little bit out. At one point, Mercedes jumps off the barricade, and Kris just catches her and just calmly walks her up the steps, slams her right down on the apron, but not to be outdone. A couple of minutes after that, they're fighting on the top turnbuckle, and Mercedes is able to slip out and powerbomb Kris on the apron. Holy crap. Tony Schiavone keeps talking about how Kris landed like hip first, and all I could think about was the way like he went ooh and ah over Major Guns' hip in WCW 2000.
I think she hit her left hip. Did Statlander talking about a hip pointer?
Oh, and the hip. Look at that hip. The hip. I got lost in hip land there somewhere.
Mercedes attacking Chris's back. I like how she ties up the arms and attacks with the knees. Statlander catching a Meteora and hits another powerbomb. A big deadlift German by Statlander as well. Mone comes back, hits the Three Amigos times dose and the frog splash. Still not enough. Kris ends up hitting a package pile driver, and Mercedes kicks out of it. Yes, the same move that put WWE champion Cody Rhodes in a neck brace was kicked out of by Mercedes Mone, and I will talk about that a little bit after this matchup. They tumble out of the ring, and the apron rips off. Mone catching Chris's leg into the ring frame and kicks the knee. Ouch. Kills her with another Meteora off the apron. Kris has to actually take her boot off to escape and overpowers Mone, a damn good near fall. Then holy shit, sit out tombstone pile driver on the apron. Looks like it's going to be a count out win for Mone, but Kris leaps back into the ring at like 9.9, and wow, they shot that moment brilliantly. I do wish we got a better angle of Chris's face after that, but just the way they caught her diving in, the literal like from out of frame into in the last second, and then you see the look of shock and disappointment and disgust on Mercedes' face as a result of that was just so well done. Mercedes with some submissions, Kris grabs the ropes, the crowd is chanting fight forever, and Mercedes is losing it. There's a brilliant sequence at the end with lots of near falls. Mone pins and wins. I give it 5 stars out of 5. I loved this matchup. It easily surpassed what they did at Full Gear, which in and of itself was a terrific match. But I love the journey they took us on with this one, and the emotional ups and downs and the fake outs and everything. I thought Statlander looked so strong in defeat, and I think Mercedes looked great too. I think they both were elevated as a result of this matchup. I hope we get a part 3 with these two soon, because these two work so well together, and I think they are perfect rivals for each other. And look, I don't think it's a bias to say that Mercedes Mone is a great wrestler, and that overall she has had a very good year. I don't get where the anger comes from or where the hatred comes from toward this woman, because you look at her body of work this year across AEW in Japan, there was a rough start in the beginning of her run. Yes, I think the early matches she had weren't that great, but she's kind of grown into it, and she's had a lot more good matches this year than she's had bad ones. And I do want to touch on the stuff about the pile drivers, because I know some people made those comparisons about, the way WWE treats pile drivers, for instance, compared to how AEW treats them. WWE treats it a lot more seriously, and the wrestlers sell them, and they're in neck braces and Orton's laid out with a regular pile driver, and, you know, it's a lot more serious and dangerous in that world, and obviously not so much in AEW. Now, I don't believe that one portrayal of pile drivers is inherently better or worse than another one, but it does kind of boil down to, you know, the different philosophies that these different companies hold about certain moves and how moves are treated. And I've talked about this in other videos in the past and different topics and whatnot. This is just my personal opinion, which I have come to my conclusions based on years of watching wrestling and observing all these different wrestling companies over the decades and whatnot, and my involvement in wrestling, which, as funny a statement as some of you might think that is, it doesn't make it any less true, on 19 years now in March. But the fact is, every wrestling company, every wrestling organization has their own set of rules and logic for how matches go, for what wrestlers can fight each other, for, you know, what kind of rules are in matches, for what kind of gimmicks and whatnot. There are a lot of similarities, right? You know, all these wrestling companies have some of the basic tenets that make it professional wrestling, but then you can kind of take those things and take those rules and that logic and shape it to whatever the discretion is of the people in charge. And so yes, WWE is going to do it differently than AEW. I don't believe it is truly fair to compare them because they are not the same wrestling product. As we can clearly see, these two companies operate with their own kind of logic of how wrestling should go. And I don't believe that one is inherently better than the other. I enjoy them both, and I think they both have a lot of merit. And, you know, I think that it's good for WWE to portray pile drivers as, oh my God, it's the ultimate ultra move or whatever. And, you know, AEW obviously has jumped the shark with that, so they don't have that problem. It's fine for them to be doing it that way because that's just the way they do it. I guess the more I think about it, the differences in philosophies among wrestling companies as far as things, you know, like how moves are sold or how gimmicks are portrayed and whether or not there's intergender wrestling and whatnot, it's not that different from, well, different religions where they all kind of believe in a god, but they all have their own different rule sets about it. You know, someone's got to do a senior thesis about that, right? In our semi-main event in the Continental Classic Finals for the Continental Championship, as Kazuchika Okada defends against a bloody and beaten Will Ospreay. Of course, these two each wrestled a match beforehand, but obviously Ospreay suffered a bit more of a beating here, as you can see him still has the blood caked on his face. He's bandaged as he goes into the ring here. There's a holy shit chant before the bell even rings. I love when the crowd is that amped up before they even lock horns to go holy shit. I do also appreciate how Excalibur kind of told the history between these two, weaving it in throughout commentary, talking about their history in Rev Pro UK and in New Japan, being part of the Chaos group together, and of course their win-loss record against each other over the years. Ospreay trying to use his agility, but Okada is still fresher. He catches him, hits him with like 3 straight DDTs, but Ospreay manages to kick out. And okay, I know I just did a big rant about pile drivers a minute ago, but even I had to look at the 3 straight DDTs, 2 of them on the floor, and be like, okay, that's a bit much. It could have varied it a little bit is what I'm saying. The bandages are off now. The beating continues. Ospreay manages to fire up and hit a big suplex. Okada makes an all-time meme face. They go back to the outside. Ospreay escapes a tombstone attempt and hits an Os cutter off the barricade. More head and neck attacks. Ospreay continues to manage to fight back. He hits the Styles Clash. Okada kicks out. Okada hits the Rainmaker. Ospreay kicks out. Each man is kicked out of the moves that won them the earlier round, so the stakes are that much higher. They're trading strikes and headbutts. Ospreay bleeding again. Ospreay catching a Rainmaker into the Spanish Fly. We get another near fall. Crazy ass sequence leads to Ospreay hitting his own Rainmaker. The Stormbreaker, and Okada somehow kicks out. The fans are standing for this. Okada hops out of the Tiger Driver, hits another Rainmaker. They are both out. These guys are going ballistic against each other here. Another Stormbreaker attempt is escaped. Okada hits yet another Rainmaker, and that's all she wrote to finally put Ospreay down. Valiant attempt by the aerial assassin, but Okada manages to win. He retains the Continental Championship, and they also say he's tied with Masahiro Chono for the most major tournament victories in his career, tied with 5. So big win for Okada here. Then Christopher Daniels comes out to congratulate Okada on continuing his reign. He says he's not going to present the title to Okada because he is no longer an EVP, but this man is. Kenny Omega Omega is back. The crowd erupts to hear his music and see him come out for the first time in forever. He comes to present the belt to his classic rival in Okada, and it's respectful. Oh, that was nice to see. We get this big zoom in on the All In Texas sign. Makes you think. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. I might have given it a 5-star rating, but honestly, gotta admit, those 3 DDTs in a row, it did set me off a little bit on that one. But they recovered fine from that because everything else about the match, the timing, the pacing, the ebb and the flow, the rest of the storytelling I thought was very good. And, you know, Okada looks really strong in this tournament. Ospreay looking amazing in defeat despite having, pushing through all the injuries and whatnot, still coming within an eyelash of winning. You know, it would have been cool to see Fletcher make it to the end of this tournament, but I think the real magic is between these two. Even though the win-loss record is very lopsided towards Okada, these two still are able to make some magic, and it was a great way to cap off what was a very strong Continental Classic, and I'm glad they've made this a recurring thing. And Kenny Omega's return is definitely exciting to see, and definitely just, again, made the crowd just come alive in a hell of a way here. It was really cool to see him back. We know he's got a match at Wrestle Dynasty. We know he is cleared to wrestle again. I'm very excited to see where Kenny Omega on the comeback trail will go. And if the seeds they're planting with Omega and Okada at All In is any indication, if it's to be believed, then that's going to be a tremendous matchup. Let's run that back. That amazing feud that those two had in New Japan. Let's see him try it again in AEW. I think that's going to be a real marquee match for AEW later this year. But yeah, good to see Kenny Omega back. Good to see him healthy again. Let's see what he can do in his comeback. Main event time. It's a 4-way match for the AEW World Championship as Jon Moxley defends against Jay White, Orange Cassidy, and Hangman Page. As the match begins, kind of a weird harbinger of things to come here with this one. The bell rings and there's this confusion because like somehow Moxley's championship briefcase is like handcuffed to the middle rope. And so Marina Shafir just has to like break the handcuff in order to get it away from the ring. Like, what the hell was that about? As the match begins, like the other 3 guys are just beating Moxley's ass. It's 3-on-1 mugging here for a while until Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta show up to even the odds, and everything just kind of spreads out and it gets really chaotic as the camera crew tries to find anyone, and Jim Ross on commentary is like, where'd everybody go? Because you see like Hangman and White are fighting Yuta and Castagnoli, and meanwhile you've got you've got Moxley and Cassidy brawling as well, but the cameras don't really know where to follow it. So there's a bit of confusion and a bit of a lag as this match is happening. The crowd doesn't quite know how to respond to things, but then you've got this moment here where they regain the advantage. They beat up Moxley again. They do the Shield powerbomb through the announce table, which was a very lovely reference there. I appreciated that. So that's kind of a triple threat for a few minutes, and we get this shot of Christian Cage and the Patriarchy sitting up in the skybox, and then we just get this wide shot, and we can finally see at the end, oh, there's Hook also in the rafters, kind of like staring at Christian Cage, because that's a story happening right now, is that, Taz was laid out with injury. He was written off for his surgeries, and so Hook was trying to find the attacker. It's Christian. They haven't had their match yet, but they're still like trying to get to that, I guess, but like that was just in the middle of this other match with 4 other guys. Oh, and by the way, big missed opportunity on the Dynamite this past week when Taz was back and didn't acknowledge once that storyline at all, or coming back from injury, any of that stuff. I don't know why they decided to omit any of that, because it makes it feel like the whole storyline is kind of pointless. Anyway, this little insert in the middle of the 4-way match just made everything feel more of a cluster. There's a lot of back and forth with all the lads until Moxley finally re-enters the ring, and he's actually bleeding in the back of the head, hard way. It's the first time he's bled in forever. Orange rocks Mox. Hangman pulls out the referee mid-count. What a dick. Hangman is primed and ready, but Wheeler Yuta shows up again. Hangman hits the bug shot anyway, but the ref is still out. Damn the consequences of your own actions, Adam. Dick kick city. Jay White hits the Blade Runner, but Yuta attacks the referee now. Marina gets in the ring, but White strikes first and hits the Blade Runner to a huge pop. Yuta hits him with a Busaiku knee. Moxley hits the Death Rider on White. Claudio just hoists Remsburg back into the ring. He makes the count. Moxley wins and retains the title. It looks like they're going to do some more damage to White, but then FTR make a surprise return, followed by Adam Copeland. Rated FTR in the house. Copeland is back from his leg injury. The goons are chased off, so we get the face-off with Moxley and Copeland. We get the spear. He breaks off a piece of the chair and puts the crossface with it on Moxley, completing the Shield set. Copeland then gets the microphone and it doesn't work. Copeland then gets a working mic and says they're coming for the Death Riders, and that is how we wrap the show up. I'm going to give it 2 stars out of 5. This was not a very well executed main event matchup. I think that, first of all, the 4-way setting was kind of destined to be kind of a foregone conclusion. Like, okay, we know Moxley's retaining here, but let's just see where the journey takes us. But the journey, unfortunately, was kind of ramblomatic and confusing. Like, I get the Death Riders' involvement throughout the match. It was expected, but also a little excessive. Like, this, is stuff that we clown the Bloodline for doing in WWE. So it's just more the same of that. Then the Christian and Hook thing in the middle of all that just took away from the story that those 4 were telling, and really it led to a main event that really lacked the spark and the energy that those previous 2 matches had. And I'm excited for FTR back. I'm excited for Copeland back on one level. I'm not thrilled about the idea of a Copeland-Moxley world title feud. Just given the overall landscape of AEW right now and the people you might want to push. My chaos prediction for where this goes would be that Copeland beats Moxley and then Christian Cage immediately cashes in and becomes a champion. So let's put a pin in that and we'll see where it goes. But we'll see if Cope is the hope for this, because my patience is kind of wearing thin on the Death Riders angle at this point. If I held off on doing best and worst of countdowns in January instead of December, I might have, included this and just this whole Death Riders storyline in the worst of countdown, because I gave it a chance at the beginning, but now it's just okay, where are we going with this? What is the end game? And look at all the other, takeover groups you've kind of left in the wake as a result of this. What's the end of this one, That being said, my overall grade for AEW Worlds End, the final pay-per-view of 2024, a B-. This was still better than last year's Worlds End. I'll give them that much. There were 2 really, really good matches on this show. Mercedes and Kris, and then Ospreay, Omega, and then, a runner-up in that category to Ospreay and Fletcher as well, and some great returns in Copeland and FTR and Kenny Omega. But everything besides that was just okay. Really good matches for, Dynamite or Collision. The main event just felt like a big cluster to me and really just highlights how muddled and confusing the world title picture is right now, which, it's not that great to see. But there were some things, stories that were told in this show that I am intrigued to see where they go from here, like Ricochet and Swerve, and how we're going to get to Okada Omega possibly, and where Ospreay goes from here. And hey, when are we seeing those Costco guys again? Am I right? But in all seriousness, folks, what did you think of World's End? What were your favorite matches and moments? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and of course, hit that bell icon for all the notifications. And folks, this is the last video, Lord willing, of 2024, unless some massive breaking thing happens in the next couple of days. But if this is the last video of 2024 for Wrestling with Regret, I just wanted one more time thank the viewers so much for making this another unforgettable year of Wrestling with Regret, and I am so excited to see what 2025 holds for this channel and for wrestling at large. Thank you once again so much for your support. I'm Brian Zane, and I will see you in the new year.